Hey guys, hopefully the last lesson was okay, 9.3. We're going to move on to 9.4 where we're going to work with surface area. For surface area, we're definitely going to need to be familiar with rectangular prisms and the area of rectangles and triangles. So hopefully you remember those formulas. If not, look back. And then you'll also need to be familiar with perimeter, which hopefully we all are. Okay, so before we start, I recommend that you just take note of the following two things. We're mostly going to be working with rectangular prisms for this lesson. Okay, that means the bases and the sides are rectangles. And here is a net of that rectangular prism. For example, the net is us unfolding the actual rectangular prism to where we see the side, the front and back, and the other side. And on the two opposite ends, we see the bases, which are also rectangles. Okay? For this lesson, we're going to need to know lateral area and surface area. There's a big difference between them when you're reading. The lateral area is only asking us for the area of all the faces. So the sides and the front and back, not the bases. And then surface area is actually the sum of all the areas of each single shape that's part of that rectangular prism. So the lateral area plus the two bases. So I kind of color coded it for you. Lateral area in green is the sides and the front and back. And the surface area is a mix of both of them. Okay, so the pink and the green. The sides, front and back, and then both of the bases. All right, so if you want to pause and just write those two definitions down for yourself somewhere, feel free. If you want to make a net like this one to kind of help you, feel free. It's also in your book on page 283. So take a second now to pause if you need to. Otherwise, make sure you're on page 283 and we're going to go ahead and start. I'm going to keep referencing this, okay? All right. So modeling surface area of a prism. The surface area of a three-dimensional figure is the sum of the areas of all the surfaces. Okay, you should have used a net last year, so this should be semi-familiar to you. You know how to use the net of a figure to find its surface area. Now we're going to discover a formula that we can use too. Okay, so for the lateral area, that's the first thing it's asking for. Lateral area, again, being just the area of all of the sides, front and back. Okay, we need to figure out how to do this. So L standing for lateral area is going to be, I'm going to grab my calculator right now so that I can have it with me, and you should have your calculator too if you don't quickly grab it. Okay, so I need to do not the bases, but the actual sides. And if I look here, I have these sides. I'll focus just on the sides right now. And the measurements I have there for just this rectangle from the prism is 20 by 8. So I'm going to multiply 20 by 8 to get 160. And since there's two sides identical, right, to those measurements, we're going to multiply 160 by 2. So each of these is 160. Okay, hopefully that made sense. And then the second part, we're not focusing on the bases yet. Lateral area is just the sides, front and back. Now I'm going to focus in on this rectangle, the front. And the measurements for this rectangle are no width necessary, right? We're going to do 15 by 20. So I'm going to multiply 15 by 20 to get 300. And since the front and back are identical, that's also multiplied by 2. Okay, so now with my calculator, I'm going to go ahead and do 300 times 2 is 600, right? 2 times 160 is 320. 2 times 300 is 600. So 320 plus 600, 920. Okay, so this is only the lateral area. Now for the area of the bases, this is separate, right? Now I'm going to focus in on just this bottom piece here, the top and the bottom, right? And for that, I don't need to use the height to find the area. I'm just going to use 8 times 15. So if I do 8 times 15 in my calculator, that's 120. So the area of each base is 120. But there's 2 of them, right? So we can't forget that when we're finding the surface area. And for surface area, what we're doing is adding the area of the lateral, faces, sides, and then the 2 bases. So I'm going to add 920 plus 120, but that's only one base. So I'm going to add another 120 to get 1,160 millimeters squared. Okay, so how we did that was 920 plus a base plus another 120 base. Okay, if that didn't make sense, just re-watch it, please. All right. But all you have to know is how to find area of a rectangle, right? An area is base times height or length times width, however you want to look at it, right? And what you really need to make sure you do is if color coding works for you as you're working from shape to shape, do it side to side. But you need to remember that there's 2 identical, right, shapes on the sides, 2 identical in front and back, 2 identical top and bottom bases. So everything is multiplied times 2. It's easy to forget, okay? All right, let's flip the page to 283. And now we'll easily use a formula to kind of help us. Now I say easily, but it's not necessarily the easiest formula to remember. Some of you may find your own way of doing surface area that works better for you. If you watch the Khan Academy video that I suggested also in this lesson, you might find another way to do surface area that piques your interest better. Feel free to do whatever is going to help you with this lesson, okay? So let's move on. For surface area of a prism, okay? We would use the perimeter of the base. Here's the formula. Times the height of the figure plus the area of the bases, so both bases. So the formula for surface area of a prism is perimeter times height plus 2 of the bases, right? 2 times the bases, the area of the bases. Let's put that into practice. So it's doing an example for us. Erin is making a jewelry box of wood in the shape of a rectangular prism. The jewelry box will have the dimensions shown. She plans to spray paint the exterior of the box. How many square inches will she have to paint? Exterior automatically means area. Interior would be volume, right? So let's use this rectangular prism. I drew it out for myself too so that I could reference it, okay, while I do some work for you guys. Drawing a diagram does help you, right? So I kind of did that for myself. Identify a base and its area in the perimeter. Any pair of opposite faces can be the bases. For example, you can choose the bottom and top of the box as the bases. It's a rectangular prism. That means I could either use these 2 as the bases or the way that it's sitting right now, this larger rectangle in the top, right? So what I'm going to do is use this bottom rectangle. And my goal is to find the area of the base. I need that in that formula, right? So 12 times 15, again, we'll pull out our calculator, 12 times 15, and we get 180. So the area of the base equals 180. Okay, that's one base. My height in this case is 6. So I'm going to fill in 6. My length in this case is going to be 12, how long this box is. And my width is going to be 15. Those are important to know, right? So I already found the area of one base. I need that to find the surface area. I'm going to take both of them, okay? But I need to find the perimeter for this formula. So in order to find the perimeter, we're looking for the perimeter of the bases. Perimeter on a rectangular prism or a rectangle is just this side plus this side plus this side plus this side, right? So technically 12 plus 15 plus 12 plus 15. Or 12 times 2, because there's 2 of them, and 15 times 2, because there's 2 of them. So for the perimeter, I would have 2 times 12 plus 2 times 15. So 24 plus 30, which equals 54. I need that for this equation, and I also need the area of my bases for this equation. So if the equation now is surface area equals perimeter times height plus my 2 bases, I'm going to plug in what I know. I know my perimeter is 54 times my height, 6 inches, plus 2 times 1 base, which is 180. And now I can solve, right? 54 times 6 is 324 plus 2 times 180 is 360, which equals 324 plus 360, 684 inches squared. Right? So she would need to spray paint 684 square inches of wood. Hopefully you followed that along, right? Step 1 was finding the perimeter of the bases. 12 plus 12 plus 15 plus 15. Basically what we did right here. Step 2 was finding the area of one of the bases. In this case, 12 times 15. And all we did then was plug into this equation. The perimeter was 54 times my height, which is in my illustration, 6, plus 2 times the area of my base, 180. Okay, so that's how we would use that formula. Keep that formula at hand because we're going to use it right now, okay? It's asking us in this practice problem, a brand of uncooked spaghetti comes in a box that is a rectangular prism with a length of 9 inches, a width of 2 inches, and a height of 1.5 inches. Okay, if you guys could pause this video to take a minute or two to try this on your own before I do it with you. Go ahead and pause now. If you haven't paused or if you've returned now, let's try this together. It says a brand of uncooked spaghetti comes in a box that's a rectangular prism. I'll go ahead and draw the rectangular prism because it's always a good idea to go ahead and draw or illustrate what you're working on. Obviously, this is not the best picture, right? We want to extend this down a little bit, like this. Somehow it still doesn't look right. So I will try one more time and extend out. Okay, let's see what happens. Okay, and then we will go ahead and draw these little lines. Okay, something similar to this, right? And it's telling us that it is 2 inches wide. Wow, I definitely made it longer than that. A length of 9 inches. 2 inches wide. Don't even look at it. But regardless, we're going to use it. Okay. And now we need to use the equation surface area equals perimeter times height plus 2 times the area of the base, right? So let's go ahead and put that into use. For perimeter of the base, we have 9 and 2. So we're going to do 9 plus 9, which is 18, plus 2, which is 20, plus 2, 22. So we have surface area equals 22 times, what is our height? 1.5, plus 2 times the area of one of our bases. So our base is this rectangle on the bottom here. So we would just do 9 times 2, which is 18. So 22 times 1.5, we would use our calculator. 22 times 1.5 to get 33, plus 2 times 18, which is 36, is equal to 69. And what is our unit of measurement? Inches squared. Hopefully that's what you got. If not, maybe it's somewhere you realized what the mistake you're making is. Maybe it's in the fact that you're not multiplying times 2 bases. Maybe you're using the wrong measurements for length and width and height. You really have to make sure you're comfortable labeling some of these figures, okay? Or all of these figures, I should say. All right, moving on. Okay, now this is where it just gets a little trickier because we're adding one more component to it. Right now we have kind of a composite figure where we have 2 prisms of some sort together. But the equation does not change, okay? We just have to work with each figure on its own. All right, so Daniel built the birdhouse shown. What was the surface area of the birdhouse before the hole was drilled? So we're using this hole still in this rectangular prism, so we're basically ignoring that it's even there. What I need to know though first is that this is a triangular prism, right? Has bases of triangles with a height of 8 and the base is 30. Hopefully you're seeing that, right? And then the bottom is a rectangular prism with a height of 18. Okay. And then a base or a length of 30 and a width of 24. Okay. So one face of each prism is not on the surface of the figure, right? Because one of them is sitting on top of the other. But we're going to use that later. So find the surface area of each prism. Sounds easy enough, but we're actually going to try and do it together, right? Let me wipe off my whiteboard. If you guys have something too, maybe get out a piece of paper because you're going to need a little bit of space. Okay. The first thing you would do is find the perimeter of the triangular prism, but that's the perimeter of the base, right? So the base is this triangle here. That means I need to use the measurement of 30 as the length and 17 as the sides, right? So I would have 30 plus 17, which is 64. Then the area of my base is 1/2 times the base times the height. So 30 times the height of 8 times 1/2, which gets me 120. I need to now plug those in to my actual equation. Okay. So perimeter, 64, times the height of my actual figure itself, right? Because if I laid this down with these being the bases, it would be 24 centimeters tall. Okay, so times 24 plus 2 times the area of one of the bases, right, would get me 1,766 for the triangle. Now for the rectangle, it's a little bit different, right? It should be a little easier. The perimeter is a rectangle, or the figure is a rectangle. So it has 2 30 sides and 2 24 sides. So I would do 2 times 30 plus 2 times 24 for the perimeter to get 108. And the base of the area of the base is 30 times 24, which is 720. If I plug that into this equation for the rectangle, I would get 108 my perimeter, times my height of 18, plus 2 times 720, which is one of the bases. Okay? When I do that, I get 3,384. Now, I'm going to add those two together because I obviously want the whole figure. The only problem is that this birdhouse, I'm not painting the base of the birdhouse, okay, because it's not necessary to paint. And I'm also not painting the top of the birdhouse, this rectangle part, because there's a whole triangle laying on top of it. So I actually don't even need the bases of this rectangular prism. I don't need the bottom or the top of it. So I'm actually going to take away both of the bases of the rectangular prism, which is 2 times 720. So if I added the surface area of the triangular prism plus the surface area of the rectangular prism, and I took away both bases of the rectangle, I would get 3,720 centimeters squared. Okay? Now, be very careful with that. Obviously, it's asking you what was the surface area of the birdhouse before the hole was drilled. If there's something laying on top of the rectangular prism, you're actually not painting that top, right? And I'm not painting the bottom because the bottom of this shape either, because I have them laying on top of each other. Okay? So there's two bases there that we would have taken away. Not this bottom part, but the base of the rectangular prism here, the top, and then the base of this triangular prism, the bottom. Okay, so two bases that don't need to be painted, okay? Thinking about that, like if I were to attach this side of the eraser to this side of my phone, right? Since these two are touching, I don't actually need to paint them, okay? And yes, it is 11:15 at night. Okay, so let's move on then and put this into practice. We have an example for you for number 4. I'm going to do it with you, okay? So Dara is building a plant stand. She wants to stain the plant stand except for the bottom of the larger prism. Find the surface area of the part of the plant stand that she will strain. Okay? So here's what's going to happen. You guys go ahead and take 2 minutes to try this on your own. Okay? And then we'll go ahead and work through it. So pause now. Okay. If you've come back or if you didn't pause at all, because you want to see me do the problem, that is completely fine, but make sure you're actually trying on your own too so that you're getting practice. All right, so let's start with first the top square. Well, it's a cube, right? So it has 6 sides, top, bottom, 2 sides, and then 4 sides actually, so 6 altogether. So 8 times 8 for one of them is going to be 64, but there are 6 entire faces here, right? So we're going to do 64 times 6, which is 384. And then we're going to look at the bottom one. The bottom is also a cube, but it's 12 by 12, and it also has 6 sides. So we're going to do 12 times 12, which is 144. Also times 6, which is 864. Okay? Now we're going to add those two together. Okay? So we got 384 plus 864 to get 1248. Now, the one thing you should notice is that these shapes are actually hitting one another, right? So I don't need to actually stain or paint, it should say, right? Staining and painting similar. The base of this figure, the 8 by 8, right? And so that's one of the bases because it's actually touching the other one, and I don't need to stain them if I'm gluing them together, or I don't need to paint those two. So I'm actually going to take away one of these bases. So 64 taken away from 1248. Which is 1,184. But also, it's taking part of this other figure here, right? It's on top of the bottom part here too, so I need to take away that part that it's hitting as well, okay? So that's another 64 that's coming out of this top piece of this rectangle because it's also being covered. So that's also minus 64, which is 1,120. Okay, and then the problem is asking to exclude, so except for the bottom of the larger prism. Well, the bottom of the larger prism is this base here, right? And it doesn't want it, which makes sense because you don't usually paint the bottom of something that you're going to put either on the floor or wherever, right? So it wants us to exclude that. So we need to find that base also, which is 12 times 12 or 144. So we're going to take 144 away from that too. So we should be left with 976 inches squared that she actually will be staining for the part of the plant stand that she's going to use. Okay? If you need to relook that one over, please do. Here's another way to just look at it, okay, if you wanted to visualize it in a little different format. Let's start with the bottom up. Okay, we'll work with the bigger piece. We have her trying to stain everything in this bigger piece except for the bottom. So instead of 6 faces or sides that we're using, we're only using 5 of them. So we're going to do 144 times 5, which is 720. Okay? And for this 8 by 8 one, we're also not painting the bottom of it because it's stuck to another shape. So we're going to take that bottom piece off too. So technically then we're only working with 5 sides again. So we're going to do 8 times 8, which is 64, times 5, which is 320. And if I add those together, I get 1040. Now the only thing I forgot to leave out was the fact that this bottom piece of this 8 by 8 cube is also touching the top piece of this 12 by 12 cube. And that part is also not being stained or painted because something is sitting on top of it. So we're excluding that from the measurement also. So that's another 64 that we're taking away, okay? So I have 1040 minus 64, which is 976. Okay? You really have to visualize this. Even if you're at home, try to put 2 things, one on top of the other, and see, I mean, bigger box, smaller box, right? And if you were painting it, think about what you would actually paint if those 2 were on top of each other. You wouldn't paint the 2 sides that are actually touching from each box because those are going to be glued together anyways. So no need to paint those 2. They take up space that is not going to be painted, okay? Hopefully that visual helped you. I'm not really sure. I truly hope. If not, please go to Khan Academy, okay? All right. You guys are going to go ahead and move on to do your homework, okay? You're going to do the odds on page 287. If you feel like doing the evens, feel free.